No matter which country you're from, kids' TV shows can sometimes be surprisingly strange viewing, and Australian children's television is no different. The weird kids shows of Australia Iceberg is sorted by what I consider the most well-known to the least known Australian children's TV shows with some strange elements. Anyway, on to the first layer. Round the Twist. Round the Twist is probably the first thing you think of when you hear the phrase "weird kids shows from Australia," and for good reason. Inspired by the books of Paul Jennings, Round the Twist sees the Twist family, widow dad Tony and children Pete, Linda and Bronson, move into a lighthouse where bizarre things happen. They include but aren't limited to a wish-granting Santa Claus, a fox skin brought back to life by feeding it lemons, and in one episode, Bronson uses his appendage as a propeller, and the lighthouse is also haunted. The Twists also have to deal with being hassled by local businessman Mr. Gribble, played by Frankie J. Holden in the first season of the show, and Mark Mitchell in the rest of the series. Bananas in Pyjamas. You only need to say the phrase "bananas in pyjamas" out loud to realise just how strange the idea behind this show is, but it gets weirder. Originating from a Sonon Play School, the Bananas in Pyjamas, B1 and B2, are friends with 3 teddy bears and the Rat in the Hat. The original show featured actors in suits, but the CGI reimagining of the bananas makes them look off. It's hard to say exactly why. Maybe it's their eyes going from simple black dots to almost human ones. Or perhaps it's their previously unseen teeth making an appearance. The Wiggles. Known all over the world for their songs and stage shows, the Wiggles have also become famous thanks to their TV shows. Their first show has everything you'd expect of a Wiggles TV series. There's Dorothy the dinosaur, Captain Feathersword, and of course the Wiggles themselves. But then there are the puppets. Vacant eyes, slasher smiles, unmoving hair, unnatural movements, they are firmly within the uncanny valley. Whether you're a kid or an adult, there's something just endlessly disturbing about them. H2O, just add water. Australia is famous for being surrounded by water, so it makes sense that there'd be at least one show out of the country about mermaids. In H2O, 3 friends go swimming in a magical pool on a full moon night, which somehow gives them the ability to turn into mermaids whenever they touch water. This causes havoc in their daily lives, but the strangeness in H2O doesn't just stop at the girls' mermaid transformations. They also have power over the water around them, and they start acting up if they look at the full moon. And all of this takes place among some truly mind-boggling plots, including kidnappings, a dolphin falling in love with one of the girls, and wildlife trafficking. Mr. Squiggle. Mr. Squiggle is a man from the moon with a pencil for a nose, and his antics perplexed Aussie kids for decades. Each episode of the show would see Mr. Squiggle come down to Earth in a rocket ship and become compelled to make drawings out of scribbles sent in by kids. These scroll-filled pieces of paper were held in place by the ever-cranky and sometimes depressed blackboard. Among Mr. Squiggle's other friends were Gus the Snail, Bill the Steam Shovel, and a literal doormat. Mr. Squiggle also had a female companion throughout the series who would spur him on to draw. Liftoff. Made in the 1990s, Liftoff was an educational show for kids with many WTF elements. The kids themselves are pretty normal. It's everything else in Liftoff that goes completely off the rails. If you grew up in Australia in the 90s, then you might still be haunted by EC, a doll rescued from the scrap heap that has a resemblance to Slender Man. but I'd argue that everyone is sleeping on a lot of other prime nightmare fuel in Liftoff. The kids' backpacks come to life when nobody's looking. There's a paranoid frill-neck lizard who films humans to show the rest of its species. And who could forget Beverly, a bizarre pot plant with an eye on the end of its stalk which moves around on its own free will, and the kids just accept it. Capping things off is the authoritarian building superintendent Mr. Fish, played by Mark Mitchell, who also appears as various other authority figures throughout the series. There's also an elevator that is capable of some truly peculiar things. Spellbinder. Spellbinder is great. A prank at a school camp goes wrong, leaving teenager Paul Reynolds stranded in a parallel world where the Industrial Revolution seemingly never happened. Paul is soon befriended by Rihanna, a girl from the local village who tells him all about the Spellbinders, who keep the population obedient with magic and their power suits. In reality, the Spellbinders actually use science and knowledge from the past to retain their hold on power. No other Spellbinder exemplifies this quite like Ashka, the main villain of the series played by Heather Mitchell, who you can tell is having an absolutely great time. For an Australian kids show, Spellbinder explores some pretty heavy themes. There's use and abuse of knowledge, keeping the population ignorant to maintain power structures, and it's also implied that a nuclear war took place in the Spellbinders world before the start of this series, which has led those left behind struggling to retain lost knowledge. And that's all without even talking about the second season, which features a trans-dimensional bamboo boat. The Upside Down Show. The Upside Down Show stars not just one, but both the Umbilical Brothers. Their act is beyond comprehension at the best of times, and is even more surreal inside a kids show. The duo break the fourth wall by handing the viewer a remote, giving them some control over their movements and other aspects of the events on screen. Besides their usual jerky movements and weird sounds, each episode features the brothers trying to find a particular location. By opening doors in their apartment, they inevitably wind up in the wrong place, sometimes in a freaky white void. And though the Upside Down Show does feature a puppet or two, they're one of the more normal aspects of the program. Johnson and Friends. When you glimpse at clips from Johnson and Friends, it doesn't seem that unusual at first. It's a show about toys led by Pink Elephant Johnson, who come alive when the owner is out of the room or sleeping. Basically, it's Toy Story but created years earlier. Johnson and Friends starts to unnerve when you sit and think about it for long enough. You realise it's not puppets, but people in costumes portraying the toys. They would have had to have built a giant chest of drawers, giant cupboard, and giant bed to create the illusion that we're watching toys. I find something about that just doesn't sit right. The Ferals. A rat named Radis, a cat named Modigliana, a dog named Darren, and a rabbit named Mixie live in a shed near a flat occupied by human characters Lenny and Robbie. All of them suffer under Joe the landlord, who's always spinning some new money-making schemes and generally acts like a jerk to everybody. It's live action but has the occasional animated flourishes, like when the ferals hit each other, which happens quite often. It all somehow works with the grungy, chaotic vibes of the show. The series finale sees everyone's homes destroyed by a wrecking ball after another scam comes undone. The ferals' search for a new home leads into the sequel series Feral TV, where they live underground and run a pirate TV station. Both the Ferals and Feral TV had a lot of dark humour, and the fact that Mixie is named after myxomatosis is just the start of how dark it can be. The Genie from Down Under. Penelope, a teenage girl who happens to be a member of the British aristocracy, finds an opal all the way from Australia in her attic after her father dies. She soon discovers that the opal contains Bruce and Baz, a father-son genie duo. There are a couple of powerful genies, but they often have some interesting ways of granting Penelope's wishes. Penelope wishes for £20 million, but instead of receiving cash, the genies teleport her to outback Australia, where she learns that she and her mother have inherited a property worth £20 million. Penelope tries to keep Bruce and Baz a secret from everybody, while also taking advantage of their powers and denying them freedom. Against the outback Australia backdrop, Penelope and friends are constantly in conflict with Otto von Meister, a scheming tour operator played by Mark Mitchell, who plans to steal the opal for himself. The Day My Butt Went Psycho. Based on the Australian book series of the same name, you might think that The Day My Butt Went Psycho is about a singular butt that goes on a rampage. You'd be wrong. This show depicts a world in which people's butts have sentience. They split off from the rest of the person's body and compete to become the world's best butt fighter. The whole world revolves around butts, their fights, attempts to make money, and all of the butt-related puns you can imagine. Even some of the world's architecture incorporates a posterior into its design. And the butts also eat. Just think about the biology of that for a minute. SheZow. SheZow is a lot. It's a kids' superhero show at heart, but the origin story is anything but conventional. Brother and sister Guy and Kelly move into a new house after inheriting it from their late aunt. While cleaning out the basement, Guy throws Aunt Agnes's ashes into a wall, which opens a secret compartment containing a hidden ring. When Guy puts on the ring and utters the phrase, "You go girl," Guy becomes SheZow, a costumed crime-fighting superhero. But because this magic ring was meant for girls only, the costume makes Guy look like one too, and a lot of puns ensue. Lil'Elvis Jones and the Truckstoppers. You wouldn't be surprised to know that Lil'Elvis Jones and the Truckstoppers leans pretty heavily into the references to the king of rock and roll. What might not click at first is that the opening credits imply that Elvis Jones is the redhead illegitimate child of Elvis Presley himself. The opening shows a man driving a Cadillac, dumping an infant outside the outback house of a couple who just so happen to be major Elvis fans. After he grows up, little Elvis travels all over Australia performing with his band the Truckstoppers, whilst also being harassed by a businessman who wants to take advantage of their talents for his own gain. dirtgirlworld. There's something very off when you watch an episode of dirtgirlworld. The animation, if you can call it that, consists of cartoon heads and bodies with the eyes and mouths of people superimposed over the top. It might remind you of Angela Anaconda, but somehow 1,000 times worse. Just why do they have the eyes and mouth as live action, yet have nothing resembling an actual human nose? It's very disquieting to say the least. And there isn't just people in the dirtgirlworld universe either. Animals are there too, but they're a mixed bag of normal animal and human faces. Drop Dead Weird. An Australian-Irish co-production, Drop Dead Weird tells the story of a family who moves from Australia to Ireland. But it turns out that this family has a secret that they must keep from the local community. The parents are actually zombies and have to consume tomato juice to curb their cravings for human flesh. And the zombie dad is played by one of the Umbilical Brothers, so you just know that there's going to be a couple of WTF moments on screen. Thunderstone. A comet strikes the Earth and obliterates almost all life on the planet, leaving only a handful of survivors deep underground in Thunderstone. With Earth now a frozen wasteland, the leftover humans attempt to grow crops and learn about the Earth's past through a holographic system. The main character Noah gets zapped into this hologram and somehow travels back in time to a Mad Max-like dystopia with other people who are very hostile towards him, at least at first. From there, Noah tries to survive in this strange time while also trying to find a way back to his own when, though everything isn't quite as it seems. Mulligrubs. Though several hundred episodes were produced, everyone who saw it only remembers one thing about Mulligrubs: this disembodied face. The eyes, mouth, and nostrils float in space and are disturbing even today. What more needs to be said? Plasmo. A young alien named Plasmo and his sister Pasty explore the universe and try and figure out their origins. Though the two are young, they're not defenseless. Plasmo can shapeshift, while Pasty can create a force field with her tiara. The show is weird enough based on these two alone, but things amp up as soon as they meet Corridor. Corridor's single eye is unsettling on its own, but when he talks or gets excited, it looks like his mouth resembles another part of a woman's anatomy. He also takes his tea with salt. You have to give credit to the creators of the show though. Stop motion animation takes an immense amount of time and effort, and they also included a solid script and earnest voice acting. It doesn't stop it from being delightfully strange to look at though. The creator of the series has uploaded the full show on YouTube, and I'd encourage you to check it out. The Flamin Thongs. The Flamin Thongs has a similar aesthetic to dirtgirlworld, though thankfully commits to its characters' faces being fully animated. And while the animation still doesn't look quite right, and makes you question what the intention of the production was, it's what the show depicts that makes it particularly odd and unique. Out of everything on this iceberg, you'll probably find that the Flamin Thongs is the one show that puts the humble bogan in the spotlight. From the way the Thong family talks to their requisite mullets and constant thong wearing, it's quite something to behold. And the dad is voiced by none other than kids TV mainstay Mark Mitchell. The Thongs even have a cane toad that is just kinda there and not really acknowledged. In short, the show goes full Australia. Parallax. In Parallax, 14-year-old Ben is trying to find his place in life when he stumbles across a portal that gives him access to other dimensions. It's not without its perils and confusion though. Ben discovers that multiple people in his own life have doubles in these other worlds, including his own mother. Ben even has a sister in one world that doesn't exist in his own universe. Each of these realities has its own strange theme. There's one where all the people are hippies, another with super advanced technology, and yet another with terrifying mid-2000s CGI bugs that seem to cross between worlds. Jeopardy. This probably isn't the Jeopardy that you're thinking of. It's got nothing to do with the long-running game show. This Jeopardy features a bunch of school kids from Scotland who go looking for UFOs in the Australian bush and use camcorders to recount their findings. This enables the story to be told through a found footage style, similar to the Blair Witch Project, and it's not long before things get a little spooky. The kids see mysterious lights in the sky, their radios stop working, and one of the group gets bitten by a snake and is unable to access antivenom. And they also seem to encounter actual aliens. Jeopardy has a dark undercurrent and leaves the characters questioning if what they see and experience is actually happening. Are they being affected by paranoia and dehydration from their time in the bush, or is something else at play? Jeopardy ran for 3 seasons and is filled with twists and turns, and the series finale even shot 3 different endings, 2 of which have gone to air: the spooky ending and the happy ending. The third ending, known as a surprise ending, is yet to be shown on TV. Erky Perky. Erky and Perky are 2 weird bugs who have different accents for some reason. The mid-2000s computer animation on display makes it hard to tell just what kind of bugs they're supposed to be. Erky and Perky get flung from their hot dog stand home into someone's kitchen, and the series shows them doing all they can to get back, but along the way, they encounter other bugs within the kitchen, with varying levels of antagonism towards them. Master Raindrop. Master Raindrop sees 5 different warriors with elemental powers caught up in a war against the series' arch-villain, who has claws on the end of his fingers for some reason. The show was clearly inspired by Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it's surprising that the creators didn't get sued. Instead of conventional animation though, Master Raindrop opts for CGI. The results are a little off, to say the least. The Adventures of Figaro Pho. This animated series is terrifying, exactly how its creators intended it to be. It's a show that explores the different fears and phobias of the main character, Figaro Pho. There's no dialogue here, but Figaro Pho gets its points across with some disturbing and unsettling imagery in an art style familiar and foreign, all at once. It's unlike any other shows on this list and amongst Australian TV in general. The Dukes of Broxstonia. The Dukes of Broxstonia shows the exploits of a band, except it doesn't have any voice acting whatsoever. This show was made in the 2000s, but has the dirty, grungy art style that makes me think it was inspired by Mambo artworks in the 90s. There's not much more to say about this one. You'll have to see it for yourself to get a sense of how off it really is. Pig's Breakfast. 2 teenage aliens, Grub Amoeba, crash their school bus into a TV station on Earth. The pair are thrust into the spotlight by a producer at the TV station, who mistakes them for a comedic duo. Grub Amoeba are hits and are signed on as hosts of the alien show Kids Breakfast. With the help of their new friends Lucy and Rodney, the aliens maintain their secret by convincing everyone that they're just actors in suits. It's even written into their contracts that they don't have to reveal their real identities. Shenanigans ensue from there, with all of the adults becoming suspicious of the aliens' true nature, and Lucy and Rodney try to protect the secret of their new friends. The Miraculous Mellops. The Miraculous Mellops starts off with a shooting star coming down to Earth and striking a punch bowl belonging to the Mellop family, widowed father Ben and his children Michael, Jason and Samantha. The punch bowl somehow reflects the shooting star's energy onto everyday objects in the home, imbuing them with mysterious powers the kids can use. They can talk with the family dog after using a magic apron, the vacuum cleaner enables time travel, and a shirt gives anyone the ability to turn invisible. All of this is complicated by the Dumps, the neighbours who try and take advantage of the Mellops' bizarre situation for their own gain. It's eventually revealed that the magical shooting star was sent to Earth by the Grant Baby, a dying alien living on the moon seeking a new leader for his people, the Moonlings. Legacy of the Silver Shadow. Average teenagers become superheroes in this early 2000s show. What sets it apart from other shows is that these teens are mentored by the Silver Shadow, a superhero who died years ago and now exists as an AI inside his former base. But every superhero group needs a villain to fight, and the Silver Shadow's students have to face off against another of their school friends who happens to be the granddaughter of the Silver Shadow's arch nemesis. With 13 episodes, Legacy of the Silver Shadow is a quick but strange watch. Magic Mountain. Magic Mountain occupies a unique place in Australian kids TV. It was a China-Australia co-production with both Chinese and Australian English dubs, and tells its story through 4 puppets, a lion, panther, a tortoise and a dragon. Much of the show has them getting up to the usual kids level hijinks, but then you also have episodes where the dragon puffs his magic smoke onto the characters, and afterwards all of them look noticeably happier. Dead Gorgeous. Dead Gorgeous follows the 3 Ainsworth sisters who seem normal to most people, but they have a secret. Rebecca, Sophie and Hazel all died in a carriage accident in the early 1800s, and after successfully applying to the Ghost Council, they're given a new chance at life over 100 years later. The three sisters discover that their home is now a boarding school, and they must do their best to fit in and adapt to modern life, while keeping the secret of their true nature with help from other ghosts. Though the Ainsworth sisters can't be seen by the living and otherwise look normal, they still retain some of their ghostly powers. Steampunks. Steampunks is a kids' game show that ran on the ABC in Australia with a fairly abnormal premise. A bunch of children are trapped inside a machine by the host, a mad steampunk scientist called the Inquisitor. He makes them answer some bizarre questions and also makes them compete in a variety of strange tasks. The team who wins gets returned home, and the losers are told that they'll never see their families again. The host, played by Paul Verhoeven, comes across as unhinged for the majority of his screen time. As the Inquisitor, he often goes on shouting tirades at the contestants and the audience, in a weird but still funny way. Boffins. Boffins is that rare case of a TV show that was never broadcast in its home country, though it did receive an Australian VHS release. The show features 4 tiny aliens who try to learn about science on Earth while educating the school kid audience about the very same concepts. The Boffins themselves look odd enough, and it's hard not to imagine being a little creeped out by them if you watched as a kid. And when you realise that the Boffins are suit actors, and their sets are oversized just like Johnson and Friends, the show becomes a bit more unsettling. Guinevere Jones. In Guinevere Jones, a young girl named Gwen must deal with high school life. Things become complicated though when she discovers that she's a reincarnation of Queen Guinevere, a betrayer of King Arthur. From there, Gwen must use her magic powers to fight the forces of evil that hunt her down. It's a bit weird that the show has never seen a home release or made it to streaming. It ran for 2 seasons and also marked the first screen credit of none other than Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth. Surely that alone would be enough for the parties involved to come to some sort of understanding and make a release happen. Eugénie Sandler P.I. When her private investigator father goes missing, Eugénie Sandler attempts to investigate just what happened to him, all while trying to avoid being kidnapped and even killed by sinister forces. Adding on to the mystery, Eugénie discovers that all of her identification papers are false, and she's actually next in line to the throne of an Eastern European kingdom. Elly and Jools. Like many shows on this list, Elly and Jools begins with a family moving to a new town. This time, they're looking to renovate a hotel. The main character Jools soon realizes that their new house is haunted by a ghost named Elly. That might be weird enough for a kids show, but in a very dark turn, Elly claims that she's a ghost because she was murdered, and it's up to Jools to find out the truth. Rebecca Smart gives a great performance as Elly and makes you really feel the anguish that a young girl might feel surrounding her own death. There are some twists and turns along the way that I won't spoil for you here, but to have a kids show where a child character claims to be straight up murdered is a little messed up, to say the least. Finders Keepers. Finders Keepers takes us into the life of Patrick, a computer whiz kid who's invited to participate in a $1 million TV game show nobody has ever heard of. Patrick eventually gets sucked into another dimension through a TV to compete in the game Finders Keepers. Time in this dimension passes differently to Patrick's homeworld, and objects pass between the 2 dimensions through clocks. These weird time rules make the game no easy task for Patrick, as he risks fading into oblivion while passing through the time barrier. Finders Keepers is filled with surreal imagery that definitely would have had a nightmarish quality if you watched it as a kid. The jerky robot with a blank chrome face unnerves even today, and Patrick's trips between dimensions through a strange purple vortex make you feel uneasy. There's also various points where Patrick seems to be talking to a mirror version of himself, although it's never really established if this double is real. Even the show's intro with its early 90s CGI has a bit of an otherworldly feel to it. Wormwood. Airing on Channel 10 in the late 2000s, Wormwood sees a family move to a town whose economy revolves around worms. Beyond this, there are many unusual events that take place in the town, including a hideous monster, an infection that makes people do everything in reverse, and a clam that can tell the future. Though episodes don't appear to be available anywhere at the moment, some synopses and publicity photos have made their way online, so we at least have some kind of idea of how each episode played out. Catch Kandy. Catch Kandy is an orphan who lives with his sister Kate and Uncle Earl. One day, Earl accidentally slips on a roller skate left out by one of the kids, and they think that they have killed him. But instead of telling the authorities or another adult, Catch and Kate go on the run. Eventually, the duo find themselves at Taronga Zoo, but discover that their uncle is alive and is searching for them. Alpha Scorpio. Alpha Scorpio was an early sci-fi show on the ABC in the 1970s, and today there's very little information about it. Steve and Andy go camping at Aries Inlet, which also happens to be where Round the Twist was filmed. And just like that show, some strange events take place in Alpha Scorpio. Steve and Andy see weird lights in the sky and later discover that their friend Murney is an alien whose people are getting ready to invade the Earth. The intro of the show survives, but not much more today. Wildcat. In Wildcat, siblings Kat and Jamie go to stay with their mother, who works at a zoo. Things start to get a little outside normal when Kat bonds with a tiger, and the two somehow become connected. Kat starts to gain enhanced hearing, smell, and the sight of a tiger, and she also begins developing cravings for raw meat. Professor Poopsnagle's Steam Zeppelin. Professor Poopsnagle's Steam Zeppelin tells you exactly what kind of show it is in its title. Airing in Australia in the 1980s and exported around the world, this show tells the story of Dr. Garcia, who is searching for his friend, Professor Poopsnagle. Unfortunately for Garcia, his hot air balloon is shot down by the series villain. A bunch of teenagers, including Poopsnagle's grandson, help him out. The group then construct a steam-powered flying bus based on some of the professor's designs. What they make is a real chitty chitty bang bang jalopy kind of thing, which they call the Poopmobile. From there they all clamber in and go in search of the professor and adventure. The Dinky-Dis. The Dinky-Dis is a curious cartoon, to say the least. A bunch of anthropomorphic animals, led by a kangaroo, travel the world to rescue endangered species while combating their evil arch-nemesis, Mephisto. It reminds you of Captain Planet, except the Dinky-Dis are animals instead of teenagers. The animation is a bit strange in spots, but depicts a unique world unlike any other cartoon in Australia at the time. The Dinky-Dis ran for 26 episodes in the 1990s and was exported to several countries. But good luck finding out much about it. And that is the end of the iceberg. Thank you for watching or listening or however you consume this. I just thought I'd give some unscripted final thoughts now just to reflect back. So this was sort of what I personally consider the most well-known down to the least known shows with weird elements, and obviously people's thresholds are going to be altered for what they think is known or weird. I think I at least got the top layer and the bottom layer fairly spot on, but the middle layers, obviously there's some room for them to move around here and there. And I think the interesting thing about doing this was getting to see how much imagination and creativity there is or has been in Australian children's TV. We still have successes like Bluey today, thankfully, which deserves all the praise and views that it gets, but some of the past stuff is also quite enjoyable. I think the biggest surprise to me was to come across Elly Jools. That was a show that I never heard of before doing this, and I ended up watching all of it, and besides the, what the catalyst for the events are on the show, it has some interesting twists here and there that I really enjoyed. And I wish we had more stuff like a bunch of the things on this iceberg, especially in 2023 when funding is constantly being slashed and networks aren't as incentivized to produce Australian children's television as they once were. And on the remote chance that anybody recognises any of the lost media pieces, please go through your old VHS tapes, your DVDs, your USBs and everything else. And you never know, you might have a missing TV show that hasn't been seen in 20 or 30 years or something. And yeah, I really enjoyed doing this iceberg, and it's probably not going to be the last time I talk about a few of the shows on here on this channel. I know this was a different theme from what people usually expect, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. Thank you again for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, you may also enjoy some of my other iceberg videos, which I shall link on the screen now. Thank you for watching again, and take care everybody.